EGA, Chapter 1, The Dancer's Last Night. The sound of breaking glass cut through the air like a warning. Mia Finley flinched as her father's voice thundered across the tiny apartment. His eyes burned with desperation and something darker. Gambling had stolen what little soul he had left. "Dad, please," she begged, voice trembling. "You promised this was over." But promises meant nothing to a man drowning in debt. His hand came down, fingers twisting cruelly in her hair, and all she could do was cry out as he yanked her toward him. "You wish for this," he spat. "You should have had the money ready." The next moment came like a blur, his fist to her stomach, the hard impact of the tiled floor against her spine. For a heartbeat, everything blurred into the sound of her own shallow breathing. When he finally stormed out, Mia just sat there, her tears tracing silent paths over the bruises she'd grown too used to hiding. Her arms throbbed, her ribs ached, but none of it hurt as much as knowing her own father would trade her safety for one more night at the poker table. "You'll get it, won't you?" "By tomorrow," he'd said. "You'll save me, sweetheart." The door slammed, and she was alone. Mia curled her knees to her chest, whispering to the quiet room, "This'll be the last time." It had to be. By the time her best friend Lena came home, Mia had already fixed the cracked compact mirror on the table and was dabbing concealer over the purple shadow under her eye. "Oh my God, Mia," Lena gasped. "What happened? Did he—" "Don't," Mia cut in, her voice steady, though her hands shook. "It's fine." "Fine?" Lena's reflection glared at her through the mirror. "You're covered in bruises. We should report him." Mia gave a weak laugh. "And tell them what? That my dad's a washed-up gambler who beats his daughter for cash? It doesn't matter. This ends tonight." Her friend sighed, frustration lacing her voice. "You've said that before." "I mean it this time," Mia whispered, setting the brush down. "Tonight's my last shift. I'm walking away. For good." Inversely, the neon lights of Club Elysium bled through the rainy night as Mia stepped out of the cab. For 3 years, she'd been the main attraction here, a dancer who could make men forget their names for the span of a song. She stared up at the glowing sign, taking one last breath of the perfume and liquor-stained air. "Let's give one last look at this filthy place," she murmured, squaring her shoulders before walking in. Backstage, the girls were already prepping. The smell of hairspray and perfume filled the narrow hallway. When Mia appeared, a hush followed her entrance. She was radiant, her curves wrapped in shimmering silver fabric, a hint of lace tracing her neckline. "Ready for your finale, Mika?" Chester, the club owner, called out. His grin was all business, greedy, proud, untrustworthy. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied. The host's voice echoed through the speakers. "Gentlemen, let's give it up for the one and only Queen of Elysium, Mika." Cheers erupted as Mia stepped into the spotlight. Red and blue strobes danced across the stage, the French rhythm pulsing through her veins. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each sway of her hips a goodbye, each turn a silent promise to herself that this would be her last performance. And then, through the sea of faces, she saw him. A man seated in the front, wearing a dark suit that looked far too expensive for this place. Gray eyes, sharp, unreadable, caught hers and held. The world seemed to narrow to that single look. Something about him felt different, dangerous. And for a reason she couldn't explain, her pulse skipped. By the time the music faded, the room erupted in applause. Mia blew a kiss to the crowd, but her gaze lingered on the strangers. He didn't clap. He only smiled, slowly, deliberately, as if he already knew her name. Backstage, Chester was waiting. "Bravo, Mika. The crowd loves you," he said, clapping his hands together. "You sure you want this to be your last?" "I've made up my mind," Mia replied, wiping the shimmer from her shoulders. "I'm done after tonight." "Well then," he said, picking up a brown envelope from his desk. "I have an offer for you, a little farewell gift." She frowned. "If this is another of your private room requests, the answer's no." He chuckled. "Relax. No one's asking you to do anything you don't want to. Just share a few drinks with a client. He's willing to pay $500,000. Mia froze. $500,000 for drinks? Chester leaned forward, voice dropping. "You'll want to meet this one. He's influential." The number echoed in her mind. 500,000. Enough to erase every trace of her father's debt. Enough to start over. "What's the catch?" she asked quietly. "No catch," Chester replied with a shrug. "You talk, you drink, you leave richer." Her reflection in the office window looked calm, but inside, her stomach twisted. Maybe this was fate giving her one last chance to escape the hole she'd been dragged into. Mia straightened her shoulders, pushing down the tremor in her hands. "Fine," she said at last. "One night. Then I'm done." H2, Chapter 2, One Saving Grace Gone Wrong. Section. The clock in the dressing room ticked past midnight, its rhythm loud against the hum of laughter outside. Mia adjusted the strap of her dress, a pale satin number Chester had practically shoved into her hands. Too elegant for Elysium, too revealing for comfort. Her pulse quickened as she stared at her reflection. "Just talk, Mia," she whispered to herself. "You talk, you drink, you walk away." Section. A knock sounded on the door. Chester's grin appeared in the crack. "Car's waiting. Don't keep him waiting, sweetheart. The man hates delays." "Who is he?" she asked again. "Adrian Cole," Chester said, savoring the name. "Tech mogul, billionaire, controls half of Cole Industries. He could buy this whole block and not notice the dent in his wallet." Mia frowned. "Then why come here?" "Because people like him always want what they can't have," Chester said, eyes gleaming. "And tonight, that's you." The night air outside was thick with mist. A black limousine idled at the curb, its headlights glowing faintly in the drizzle. A driver stepped forward and opened the door without a word. Mia hesitated only a second before sliding inside. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and leather. A bottle of champagne rested in a holder beside two crystal flutes. And across from her, calm, composed, sat the man from the front row, Adrian Cole. He didn't move at first, simply studied her with that quiet, assessing gaze, the kind of look that made her skin prickle, as if he could read thoughts she hadn't dared to form. "You danced beautifully," he said finally, his voice low, rough velvet over steel. "Thank you," she managed, clasping her hands in her lap. "You don't like compliments?" "I'm just not used to genuine ones." A faint smile curved his lips. "Then maybe I'll have to keep giving them until you believe one." The limo pulled away from the curb, city lights flashing through the tinted windows. Mia's reflection looked pale against the glow, nerves written in every line of her body. "So," she said, trying to steady her voice, "what exactly did you pay for tonight, Mr. Cole?" "Adrian," he corrected, "and I didn't pay for anything. I made a donation." "To what cause?" His gaze lingered on her mouth before he answered. You. Her breath hitched. That's not funny. I wasn't joking. The silence that followed was thick enough to hear the faint hum of the tires on wet asphalt. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. You can relax, Mia. I'm not interested in forcing you into anything. I just wanted to meet you. Because of my dancing? Because of the look in your eyes, he said, like someone who's already planning her escape. Her heart stumbled. Maybe I am. He tilted his head. Then what are you running from? She almost laughed. You wouldn't believe me. Try me. Mia looked out the window, rain streaking down the glass. A debt that wasn't mine, and a life I didn't choose. He didn't speak for a long time. Then quietly, that makes two of us. The limo slowed outside a private lounge, a quiet, candlelit place with tinted glass and no signboard. Adrian offered his hand. One drink. That's all. She took it, feeling the calluses against her palm, oddly grounding. One drink. Inside, soft jazz drifted through the air. The hostess led them to a private booth curtained with gauze. Adrian ordered whiskey for himself, champagne for her. They talked. About nothing, about everything. His voice was steady, his eyes occasionally catching the light in ways that revealed both power and loneliness. Mia found herself laughing once, genuinely, and the sound startled her. He smiled at that. There it is. There what is? The sound I paid for. Heat flushed her cheeks. You're impossible. Maybe. He leaned closer. But you haven't walked away yet. Her pulse jumped. The way he looked at her, measured, deliberate, made the air too thick to breathe. When his fingers brushed her wrist, she didn't pull away. Something inside her wanted to know what would happen if she didn't. By the time they left the lounge, the city had gone quiet. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and silver under the streetlights. Adrian guided her to the limo again, his hand light at her back. She should have said goodbye then, should have walked away. But something about him, the calm, the danger, the mystery, drew her in. Where are we going? She asked softly. He glanced at her, a faint smile touching his lips. Somewhere I can pretend I'm not who I am for a while. And what am I pretending to be? He looked at her as the door closed. Mine. Chapter 3. The Night That Changed Everything. The city blurred past the tinted windows, streaks of light melting into darkness. Inside the limousine, silence stretched, comfortable, yet humming with something unspoken. Mia sat angled toward the window, pretending to watch the skyline, but acutely aware of the man seated inches away. Adrian's presence filled the space, calm, commanding, impossible to ignore. He hadn't touched her since they left the lounge, but the ghost of his earlier touch still burned against her skin. The weight of his gaze lingered too, like a warmth she couldn't shake. Still nervous? He asked quietly. She turned her head. Wouldn't you be if you were me? He smiled faintly. If I were you, I'd be wondering why I said yes. She exhaled a shaky laugh. Maybe I'm wondering that already. Adrian's eyes held hers, a dark, unreadable gaze that somehow made her heart trip. Then maybe, he murmured, you just didn't want to be alone tonight. The words struck a chord deep inside her, because he was right. They stopped in front of a building that looked more like a glass sculpture than a home. Tall, modern, silent against the skyline. The driver opened the door, and a gust of cool air swept through. Adrian gestured for her to step out first. She did, heels clicking softly against the marble pavement. "This is your place?" she asked, trying to sound casual. One of them, he said simply. Come on. Inside, the apartment was all sleek lines and quiet opulence. Minimalist furniture, warm lighting, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The kind of place built for someone who controlled their world down to the last detail. Mia hesitated by the doorway, clutching her small purse. This feels like a terrible idea. Most interesting nights start that way, Adrian said. He poured them both a drink from a crystal decanter, then offered her a glass. To terrible ideas, he said. She couldn't help a smile. You really don't take no for an answer, do you? Not when the other option is pretending I don't want you here. The air between them shifted. The playful tone faded into something quieter, heavier. Mia felt her pulse stumble. The champagne in her hand fizzed softly, untouched. For a while, they talked, about nothing that mattered and everything that did. She told him about her college dreams, the plans she had abandoned. He told her fragments about his business, his beginnings, the people who had betrayed him. Every word peeled away a layer, revealing something fragile beneath the billionaire's calm exterior. And somewhere between those words and the silence that followed, something changed. Mia set her glass down. You know this can't mean anything, she said softly. Adrian's gaze didn't waver. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything to anyone else. She could have walked away then. Should have. But the way he looked at her, not as a man used to getting what he wanted, but as someone seeing her for the first time, made her forget why she came here in the first place. He stepped closer. The world seemed to narrow until all she could hear was her own breathing. When his hand reached up to brush a loose strand of hair from her face, she didn't flinch. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. Mia swallowed. I can't. The next few moments blurred into sensation. The soft press of lips, the warmth of his breath, the sound of her heartbeat filling the silence. His touch wasn't demanding, not the way she expected. It was careful, reverent, as though he was learning her by memory rather than claim. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like something to be used or bought. She felt seen. The city lights framed them in a soft glow as the night deepened. What began as a terrible idea became a quiet surrender, not of control, but of exhaustion, of loneliness, of two people pretending they didn't need saving. The storm outside the glass faded into stillness. Inside, time itself seemed to stop. When morning came, sunlight spilled through the sheer curtains, painting soft gold across the bed. Mia stirred first, disoriented, the unfamiliar warmth beside her, pulling her back to memory. Adrian was already awake, sitting at the edge of the bed, shirt half-buttoned, staring out at the skyline. She sat up slowly, the sheets rustling. Do you always wake up this early? He glanced back, expression unreadable. Only when I don't want the night to end. Her breath caught. Then why does it feel like it already did? He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because everything ends, Mia. Especially good things. She looked at him, suddenly aware that whatever had happened between them, however fragile, however real, might have changed everything. And she didn't know if it was for better or worse. That morning, he drove her back in silence. No promises, no questions, only a lingering look before she stepped out of the car. The club was closed when she passed it, its neon lights off, its windows dark. She stood there for a moment, realizing the life she knew had already slipped away. When her phone buzzed in her hand, she almost didn't look, but the message flashing across the screen made her blood run cold. Your father owed more than he told you. The debt's been paid. By Adrian Cole. You belong to him now. The world tilted. The air left her lungs. And for the first time, Mia understood what it really meant to be trapped. Not by walls or locks, but by choices she never got to make. Mia woke to the sound of her phone buzzing on the nightstand. For a second, she didn't remember where she was, only the faint scent of vanilla on the sheets, the echo of a dream she couldn't quite grasp. Then her eyes focused on the blinking notification. Subject: Employment confirmation. From Adrian Steinfield Corporation. Her heart skipped. She sat up abruptly, clutching the blanket around her chest, as if it could shield her from the sudden rush of reality. The light from the window flooded the room, painting her walls in gold and white. And for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. She'd done it. Her dream job. Her one chance to rebuild everything. Then her eyes caught something else. A text, right below the email. Unknown number. I'll see you at orientation, Mia. A.S. Her breath hitched. It wasn't possible. Her fingers trembled as she read the initials again. A.S. Adrian Steinfield. The night in the hotel came flooding back. His voice, the wine, the way his breath had brushed her ear when he whispered her name. Her stomach tightened. She had convinced herself it had been a mistake, a night meant to be forgotten. Now it was a chain. She barely remembered getting dressed before rushing to the club, where Chester was still counting bills at the back of the office. The same smug grin stretched across his face as if nothing in the world could bother him. "Morning, sunshine," he said, not even glancing up. "I'm not here for small talk, Ches." Her voice trembled, but stayed steady enough to hide the panic burning under her ribs. Why did the Steinfield Corporation email me? I never signed any contract. Oh, that. He finally leaned back in his chair, smirking. Guess congratulations are in order. You're officially out of this dump. What did you do? Mia demanded. Chester's expression softened into something dangerously casual. Relax, I didn't sell you. I just transferred your debt. You're clear here. Steinfield covered it all. Her world spun. What do you mean, covered it? He paid everything your father owed, Chester said, tapping his pen against the desk. The loan sharks, my cut, the club fees, the full amount. You're free, Mia. You should be thanking him. Her blood ran cold. You had no right. Neither did your father when he gambled away your future, Chester snapped back. But the man who showed up last week said he'd handle it. Rich guy, real serious type. Said your last night impressed him. Her voice cracked. He bought my freedom? Chester shrugged. If that's what you want to call it. Mia's heart pounded against her ribs. She took a shaky step backward, barely able to breathe. You can't just hand me over like some property. I didn't, he said with a smirk. He only asked that you work under him. I'd say that's a step up from stripping, don't you think? Her knees nearly gave out. She stumbled out of the office, her vision blurring with angry tears. Outside, the morning traffic hummed, oblivious to the storm raging inside her. That afternoon, she went to Steinfield headquarters. Every floor gleamed with luxury. Glass walls, marble floors, quiet power humming through every corner. People in sharp suits and calm smiles passed her without a second glance. But Mia felt as if they all knew. By the time she reached the top floor, her heartbeat was pounding so loud She could barely hear herself think. The receptionist smiled politely. "Miss Finley? Mr. Steinfield is expecting you." Of course he was. She walked in. Adrian stood by the window, a dark silhouette against the skyline. His suit was perfectly tailored, his hands in his pockets, the same calm authority that had both terrified and drawn her 2 weeks ago. He turned at the sound of her heels clicking against the floor. "Mia," he said softly, "I was beginning to think you'd avoid me." "I almost did." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "What the hell did you do?" "I settled your debts," Adrian said simply, stepping closer. "You were drowning. I gave you air. I didn't ask for your help." "No," he agreed. "You asked for freedom. I gave you both." Her breath caught when he stopped in front of her. Up close, the faint scent of cedar and something darker, his cologne, wrapped around her like a silent command. "You think you can just fix my life and expect gratitude?" she whispered. "I don't want gratitude." His eyes flickered down to her trembling lips before meeting her gaze again. "I want you to keep your promise." "My what?" "The night at the hotel." His tone dropped, low and quiet. "You said it was your last night living someone else's version of your life. I'm offering you a new one." She stared up at him, stunned. "As what? Your employee?" His smile was faint, but his eyes didn't waver. "For now." Her pulse raced at the weight of those 2 words. For now. The tension between them pulsed, heavy and unspoken. The air seemed to shrink, pulling her in. She wanted to hate him, the control, the arrogance, but her body betrayed her, remembering the feel of his hands, the warmth of his breath. She took a step back. "You don't own me." Adrian's gaze darkened, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "No, but you're under my protection now, until your life is truly your own." He reached out, not touching, just hovering, his fingers a breath away from her cheek. Mia froze, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "Tell me," he murmured, "does the idea of being mine scare you or tempt you?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She wanted to say both. She wanted to say neither. Instead, she turned and walked out before she could unravel completely. Behind her, Adrian watched, calm, deliberate, and already 2 steps ahead. H2, Strong, Chapter 5. The Offer He Can't Take Back. The next morning, the city felt different. Too bright, too clean, as if mocking Mia's storm of thoughts. The email confirming her position at Strong Steinfield Corporation should have made her ecstatic. But all she felt was a knot of dread in her stomach. Her first day under him, Adrian Steinfield. The man whose name everyone in the business world whispered with reverence, and whose voice still haunted her dreams. She stood outside the towering glass building, clutching her tote bag and her courage. People streamed through the revolving doors in sleek suits and purposeful strides. They belonged here. She felt like an imposter. "Just breathe, Mia," she whispered under her breath. "You've earned this." She stepped inside, and the lobby glimmered with steel and light. The sound of heels against marble echoed like a rhythm of control, calm, orderly, powerful. It was the opposite of every space she had known. The receptionist handed her an orientation badge with a warm smile. "Mr. Steinfield asked that you report to him directly after your onboarding. Top floor." Mia froze. "To him?" "Yes, ma'am." Her throat tightened. There was no escaping it. 2 hours later, Mia stood in front of Adrian's office door. The frosted glass bore his name in minimalist silver letters. Strong Adrian Steinfield, Chief Executive Officer. She knocked once. "Come in." That voice, smooth, low, deliberate. When she stepped in, Adrian was at his desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, eyes on a stack of documents. He didn't look up immediately, and it gave her time to take him in. The man was precision-made flesh, every movement purposeful, every glance sharp. "You're early," he finally said, setting down his pen. "I was told to report to you, sir." Her tone was steady, but inside her pulse was anything but. "Sir, makes me feel old," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Adrian is fine." She hesitated. "Mr. Steinfield." The corner of his mouth curved upward. "Still stubborn, I see. I just like keeping things professional. Do you?" He stood then, walking toward her with unhurried confidence. The closer he got, the smaller the office seemed to become. Because what happened between us wasn't exactly professional. Her breath caught. That was a mistake. Was it? His voice was quiet, dangerous in its calm. "You seemed very sure of it that night." Her cheeks burned. "You're my boss now." "Please don't." He stopped just close enough that she could smell the faint hint of cedar and clean smoke clinging to his shirt. "Relax, Mia. I'm not here to make you uncomfortable." His tone softened, almost tender. "But I won't apologize for remembering what it felt like when you looked at me, like you saw something you wanted, even if you didn't understand it yet." Her chest rose sharply. "That's not fair." "No," he said, his gaze locking onto hers. "It isn't." He walked back to his desk, breaking the tension only slightly. "You'll be reporting directly to me for the next few months. Executive assistant role. Close work, late hours. Can you handle that?" "I can," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Good." Adrian studied her for a long, unreadable moment. Then, as if deciding something, he spoke again. "I'm not going to pretend last night never happened," he said finally. "But I also won't let it define what happens next. The choice is yours. Stay and work under me, or walk out and your debt stays unpaid." The words hit her like a cold slap. "You're blackmailing me?" "I'm offering you a future," he said simply. "Freedom takes many forms. Sometimes it starts with a deal you didn't want to make." She looked at him, really looked. The man was ruthless, yes, but not cruel. There was something in his eyes she hadn't noticed before. A flicker of restraint, of someone trying to keep his own control intact. Mia swallowed hard. "Then I'll stay." He nodded once. "Good, you start tomorrow." As she turned to leave, his voice followed her softly. "Mia." She paused. He walked closer again, close enough that she could feel the air shift between them. "You may hate me for what I've done," he murmured, "but don't ever doubt why I did it." Her voice came out in a whisper. "And why is that?" His eyes searched hers. "Because the night I met you, you looked like someone who wanted to be seen, and I can't seem to stop seeing you." The space between them felt charged, fragile, inevitable. His hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch, an unspoken promise. She pulled back quickly before her resolve could crumble. Without another word, she left his office, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. Behind her, Adrian stood motionless, his expression unreadable, except for the smallest hint of something dangerous flickering behind his calm exterior. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. The city lights painted her walls gold and white, but all she could see was his face, the way he said her name, the control in his voice, and the strange tenderness hiding underneath. She hated the way he made her feel, powerless and alive at the same time. And she knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. H2, Strong, Chapter 6, The Line Between Them. H2, the elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. Mia stepped out onto the top floor of Steinfield Corporation, where the air itself seemed to hum differently, quieter, heavier, more deliberate. Everything here gleamed: glass walls, black marble floors, minimalist art that whispered money and power. And right in the center of it all, strong, Adrian Steinfield's office. A panoramic command center overlooking the city. Mia's heart thudded as she walked past a few employees who all seemed to move with robotic efficiency. She wasn't used to this rhythm, this precision. Every step she took felt like an intrusion. At her small glass desk, right outside Adrian's office, she placed her bag, adjusted her blouse, and took a steadying breath. "You can do this," she whispered. She had faced far worse than a demanding CEO. She had faced debt collectors, hunger, a father's anger. She had learned how to survive in the dark. This was light work. Or so she told herself. 8:02 a.m. Coffee, came the familiar low voice behind her. She turned, and there he was, crisp in a charcoal suit, white shirt unbuttoned, just enough to suggest defiance beneath sophistication. He didn't look like a man who merely existed in the world. He looked like someone who owned it. "Yes, Mr. Steinfield," she said quickly, before remembering. "I mean, Adrian." His gaze flickered with amusement. "Old habits die hard?" "Something like that," she said. As she handed him the cup, his fingers brushed hers, warm, deliberate, not by accident. Her pulse skipped. "Thank you," he said softly, before walking past her. He didn't even look back, but the faintest smile curved his lips, like he could feel the tension between them as clearly as she did. The day stretched on. Mia answered calls, typed reports, took notes during meetings she barely understood. But the worst part, the part that tied her stomach in knots, was how often she felt his gaze on her. Sometimes through the glass wall separating their offices, sometimes during meetings, when he'd glance up mid-sentence and catch her eyes. Each time, her body reacted before her mind could reason. A tightening in her chest, a flush rising to her throat. By noon, she couldn't focus, and when he called her into his office after lunch, she nearly dropped her pen. "Close the door," he said. She did, turning to face him as he leaned against the edge of his desk, sleeves rolled up, jacket off. The faintest shadow of stubble darkened his jaw, like he'd had a long day, or maybe he was just too busy to care. "I read your report on the Bucharest accounts," he said, his tone calm, efficient. "You have a good mind for detail." She blinked, surprised. "Thank you." He studied her, that unnerving, slow gaze that stripped through pretense. "Why does that surprise you?" "Because you don't strike me as someone who gives compliments." His lips curved faintly. "Only when they're earned." Their eyes held, and for a dangerous moment, the office felt smaller again, just the two of them, breathing the same charged air. She spoke first. "Is there anything else you wanted me to do?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Stop looking at me like that." Her breath caught. "Like what?" "Like you remember," he murmured, his voice rougher now. And like you're trying not to. She stepped back, her hand finding the cool metal of the door handle. We can't. He moved closer, but stopped just short of touching her. His restraint was its own kind of seduction. You think I don't know that? Her heartbeat thundered. Then why? Because every time I see you, he said, his voice low and dangerous, I remember what it felt like when you looked at me that night. Not like I was powerful or rich, but like I was real. Her chest rose sharply. The words hit somewhere deep, beyond reason or defense. You shouldn't say things like that, she whispered. I know, he said, but I never was good at pretending. Their silence hung heavy between them. Then, without warning, his phone rang, the spell broken. He turned away, answering it with his usual control. Steinfield. Mia took the moment to escape. Her hands were trembling when she reached her desk. She tried to breathe, to focus, but her skin still burned from proximity alone. This was madness, dangerous. Addictive. /HRH. That night, she stayed late, finishing reports long after most employees had gone home. The city lights outside shimmered like 1,000 small temptations. When the elevator chimed behind her, she didn't even turn. She knew who it was. Adrian walked toward her, jacket slung over his shoulder, tie loosened, eyes darker than before. You're still here, he said softly. I had work to finish. Always the diligent one. He leaned over her desk, his voice low. You know, Mia, some lines are only as strong as our will to keep them. Her pulse raced. And what if I want to keep them? He smiled faintly. Then stop looking at me like you don't. For a long, suspended moment, neither of them moved. The hum of the city below, the glow of the lights, the silence between them. It was all too much. Then, as if realizing just how close he'd come, Adrian straightened. His tone returned to calm professionalism. Go home, Mia, he said softly, before I forget where the line is. She gathered her things, her heartbeat still chaotic, and walked to the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught one last glimpse of him, standing there, hands in pockets, eyes unreadable, and knew she was already falling into something she might never escape. H2, Chapter 7, Temptation at Midnight. The city was half asleep. Rain streaked the windows of Steinfield Tower in fine silver threads, catching the glow of streetlights below. Inside, the office was quiet, the kind of quiet that carried weight, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Mia's computer hummed softly as she scrolled through the quarterly reports. It was almost midnight, and the world outside blurred into a wash of light and motion. She wasn't supposed to be there. No one was. But deadlines were closing in, and work was the only thing keeping her from thinking too much, from feeling too much. She rubbed her eyes, sighed, and reached for her coffee. It was cold. Then the elevator doors opened. Her pulse jumped before she even turned. Adrian. He stepped out, coat draped over his arm, tie gone, hair bending straightened, shirt collar open, the kind of undone that only made him look more dangerous. His expression softened when he saw her. You're still here? I could say the same about you, she replied, trying to keep her tone light. I had to review the Tokyo files, he said, walking closer. But it seems I'm not the only one who can't sleep. She forced a smile. Deadlines don't care about sleep. He stopped beside her desk, looking down at the sea of papers spread before her. "You've done half the work my entire finance team hasn't finished. I needed a distraction." His eyes flicked up, studying her. "From what?" She hesitated. "From thinking." He nodded, as if he understood too well. Then, quietly, "Sometimes thinking is the most dangerous thing we do." For a moment, neither spoke. The low hum of the city was their only witness. Then a soft crack of thunder rolled outside, and the lights flickered once. Mia exhaled a quiet laugh. "Perfect. Just what I needed." Paragraph. Adrian smiled faintly and reached past her to unplug her computer, his hand brushing hers, warm, steady. "You've worked enough tonight." "I'm fine." "I didn't say you weren't," he murmured, leaning slightly closer. "I said enough." The proximity made her heart race. She could smell the faint hint of his cologne, dark, subtle, something that lingered like a secret. "You shouldn't be this close," she whispered. "Probably not." He didn't move. "But I'm tired of pretending that I don't want to be." Her breath caught. "Adrian." He looked at her, really looked, not like a CEO, not like a man used to control, but like someone standing at the edge of something he couldn't turn back from. "You make it hard to remember where the line is," he said softly. "Then maybe we both need to step back," she managed. He smiled, small, sad, almost tender. "You first." Neither of them moved. The silence stretched, charged with everything unspoken, every restrained thought, every stolen glance, every almost touch that lingered between them. When thunder rumbled again, he finally stepped away, running a hand through his hair. "You should go home, Mia." She nodded, though her body ached to do the opposite. "Yeah." He watched her gather her things, his expression unreadable. When she walked to the elevator, he followed, not close enough to touch, but close enough to make her aware of him in every breath. As the elevator doors slid open, she turned to him. "You don't make it easy to work for you." "I don't make it easy for anyone," he replied. Then, softer, "But you make it hard to stay the way I am." The elevator chimed. She stepped inside, heart in her throat. Their eyes held until the doors closed, that long, suspended moment between want and reason. And then he was gone. That night, she didn't dream of numbers or contracts. She dreamed of rain and warmth, and a man who shouldn't matter, but somehow already did. And in his penthouse, Adrian sat alone, staring out at the rain, wondering when he'd lost the ability to keep her out of his thoughts. H2. Strong. Chapter 8. The Penthouse Meeting. End H2. The rain hadn't stopped by morning. The city skyline was shrouded in silver fog, the streets slick and glistening under gray clouds. Mia tightened her coat as she stepped out of the cab, looking up at the gleaming tower of glass that loomed over her. Adrian's private residence. The Steinfield penthouse. She'd been here once before, for a board meeting on the top floor, but this time was different. This wasn't business. Not entirely. Her phone buzzed. A text from Adrian. Block quote. "Come straight up, 51st floor. I'll be waiting." Her stomach fluttered. The elevator doors opened, and she was greeted not by sterile corporate decor, but warm lighting and modern luxury. The quiet hum of a home, too elegant to be lived in. When Adrian appeared, he wasn't the CEO she saw every day in meetings. He was in a gray sweater, sleeves rolled up, barefoot, with the faintest shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. "Morning," he said, voice low, casual. Mia swallowed. "Morning. You said it was urgent?" "It is. The Tokyo deal fell through last night. We need to fix the presentation before the shareholders' meeting." He led her across the living room, all glass and steel and city view, into his private office. The scent of coffee and rain lingered in the air. She set her laptop on the desk and tried to focus, but her mind wouldn't stop replaying last night. The way he'd looked at her, the way her name had sounded in his voice. Adrian leaned against the desk beside her, scrolling through the presentation slides on his tablet. "You've got talent," he said quietly. She blinked. "Excuse me?" This layout, the tone, the clarity. His eyes met hers. "You see things other people miss." "Thank you," she murmured, unsure what to do with the praise. He tilted his head. "You don't take compliments well." "Maybe I'm just not used to hearing them from you," she replied, smiling faintly. He chuckled, a rare, unguarded sound that seemed to fill the room. "Touché." Silence followed, not awkward, but charged. The air between them seemed to hum, the same energy that had followed them since the night in his office. Her heart stuttered when he stepped closer to look at her screen, his shoulder brushing hers. The faint warmth of his skin through the thin fabric of her blouse made her pulse quicken. She could feel his breath near her ear as he leaned in, murmuring, "You make concentration almost impossible." She froze. What?" He turned his head slightly, his voice softer now. "You shouldn't look at me like that." "I wasn't." "Yes, you were." His tone wasn't accusing, more like an admission, a confession he couldn't quite stop himself from making. Mia's throat went dry. "Adrian." He met her eyes, and whatever restraint had been holding him back began to fray. "I've tried to stay professional," he said. "God knows I've tried. But every time you walk into a room—" She cut him off, her voice trembling. Please don't say it." "Why not?" His eyes searched hers. "Because it's wrong? Or because you feel it too?" The words hit her like a shockwave. She stepped back instinctively, but her back met the edge of his desk. He didn't touch her. Not yet. But his presence alone made her breath come faster. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "You're my boss." He exhaled slowly. "I'm a man, Mia, and I'm trying very hard to remember the difference." For a long, suspended moment, neither moved. The sound of rain filled the silence. A quiet, rhythmic heartbeat against the glass. Then he turned away, jaw tight, eyes dark with restraint. "Let's get back to work." Mia nodded wordlessly, but her thoughts were chaos. She tried to focus on the data on her screen, but every time he leaned over her shoulder, her skin felt electric. They worked in silence for hours, too close, too careful, pretending not to feel what both already knew was there. When the presentation was finally done, Adrian straightened and said quietly, "You did great work today." "Thank you," she managed. As she gathered her things, he walked her to the elevator, the same way he had that night. The air was still heavy between them. When the doors opened, he said softly, "Mia." She turned, pulse quickening. He hesitated, then reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear with the lightest touch. "You should get some rest." She didn't trust her voice to answer. She only nodded. And as the elevator doors closed, Adrian stayed where he was, one hand still lifted, as if he could still feel the silk of her hair against his fingers. H2, Chapter 9, The Weekend Conference. The week passed in a blur of deadlines and caffeine. Mia buried herself in work, trying to forget the way Adrian's hand had brushed her hair, the way his voice had lowered when he said her name. But forgetting wasn't possible. Not when he was everywhere, in the boardroom, in the hallway, in the quiet moments when she caught him watching her from across a meeting table. By Friday morning, she thought she might finally have a break. That was until her inbox pinged with a new message. Block quote. Subject: Weekend Conference, Tokyo Proposal. From Adrian Steinfield. You're accompanying me to the weekend summit. Prepare the final proposal deck. We leave tonight at 8 p.m. RER. Mia stared at the email, pulse quickening. A weekend trip. Alone. With him. Megan's voice echoed in her head. Girl, this man is your red flag and your destiny rolled into one. She exhaled. Professional. Be professional. By the time their flight touched down at the coastal resort where the conference was held, it was nearly midnight. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of the sea and jasmine. Lights shimmered across the water, reflecting off glass hotel towers that looked like jewels in the night. Adrian was quiet on the ride from the airport, absorbed in his phone. Mia tried to focus on her notes, but her mind wandered to the sound of his voice, the subtle way his sleeve brushed hers every time the car turned. When they reached the resort, the concierge handed Adrian 2 key cards. He glanced at her. Top floor, penthouse suite. They only had one available, he said. Don't worry, there are 2 bedrooms. Right, she said quickly, ignoring the way her heart skipped. The penthouse was breathtaking. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, the ocean stretching endlessly below. Mia stood at the window, watching the moonlight on the waves, when Adrian's voice came from behind her. Long day? She turned. He was at the minibar, pouring 2 glasses of wine. You shouldn't have, she said, but accepted the glass anyway, opening. He smiled faintly. You look like you need it. She took a sip. The wine was smooth, rich. So do you. For a moment, they just stood there, the CEO and the assistant, the lines between them blurring under the low hum of the ocean outside. I didn't thank you properly for saving the Tokyo deal, he said after a while. You pulled that off better than anyone could have. Mia met his gaze. You already thanked me. Not enough. His voice dropped, quiet but firm. The silence that followed was heavy, not awkward, but weighted with everything unsaid. Adrian, she started, but stopped when he took a step closer. You always say my name like that, he murmured, soft, like it means something. Her breath caught. Doesn't it? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out, slow, careful, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear again. His fingers lingered for a moment longer than they should have. The sound of the ocean filled the space between them. You should rest, he said finally, stepping back. We have an early morning. Right. She set her glass down, heart racing, and turned toward the hallway. But just before she reached her door, his voice stopped her. Mia. She looked back. Adrian's eyes were unreadable in the dim light. If I ever cross a line, tell me to stop. She hesitated. And if I don't want you to? His jaw tensed, and for a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he exhaled and said softly, Then I'll be the one who has to. That night, Mia lay awake in her room, the sound of waves echoing through the open balcony. She thought of him, the weight of his gaze, the tension in his voice, the promise hidden in the quiet between words. She didn't know where this was heading, but she knew she was already too deep to walk away. Say that to the past. Morning came softly. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the wide glass walls of the penthouse, painting the room gold. The ocean below glittered, calm and endless. Mia stirred awake to the faint sound of waves and coffee brewing somewhere in the suite. For a second, she forgot where she was, until she noticed the delicate satin robe draped over a chair and her laptop open on the desk. Period. The weekend summit, the late-night work, Adrian. She sat up, pushing her hair out of her face, her heartbeat already quickening at the thought of him. When she stepped out of her room, she found him standing by the terrace, sleeves rolled, coffee cup in hand, gazing out at the sea. The early sunlight traced his profile, sharp, confident, impossibly composed. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, and something flickered in his eyes. "Morning." He gestured toward the kitchen counter. "Coffee's ready." "Thank you." She poured herself a cup, trying to look anywhere but at him. The air between them still carried the same unspoken tension as the night before. Something that felt like a question neither dared to ask. He broke the silence first. "Did you sleep well?" "I tried to," she said with a small smile. "Not sure I succeeded." "Jet lag?" "Something like that." He chuckled, the sound warm and low. Then, quieter, "I couldn't sleep either." Their eyes met, and it felt as though the world slowed for just a moment. Mia set her cup down, her voice barely above a whisper. "We should review the presentation before the meeting." "Already done," he said. "You handled the revisions perfectly." "Good." She hesitated, then added, "You don't usually bring assistants to conferences." "No," he admitted. "But you're not like anyone I've worked with before." The words lingered, heavier than they should have been. Mia's heart thudded painfully. "Adrian." He stepped closer, the faintest trace of a smile curving his lips. "You always say my name, like you're afraid it might mean something." "Maybe it does," she said before she could stop herself. For a beat, silence. A soft hiss of the sea wind through the terrace doors. Then he reached out, brushing his thumb against her wrist. A fleeting touch, but one that sent a shiver racing through her. "You don't make this easy for me," he said quietly. "Neither do you." Their voices were low, almost a whisper. The kind of closeness that left no room for lies. "Mia," he murmured, his tone shifting, rougher now, laced with restraint. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. Instead, she stepped closer. "What if I don't want you to?" His hand found her cheek, his fingers trembling slightly, as if even he didn't trust himself. "Then you have no idea what you're asking for." "Maybe I do." The moment hung there, fragile, electric, and then, just as quickly, he stepped back, running a hand through his hair, visibly torn. "I can't," he said, voice rough. "Not like this. Not when you work for me." She nodded, swallowing hard, her chest tight. "I understand." He turned toward the terrace, again, exhaling heavily, as though fighting some unseen battle. After a long pause, he said quietly, "You deserve more than a man who doesn't know where to draw the line." "Maybe," she said, her voice trembling. "But you're the only one I want to cross it with." He looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment, she saw something raw in his eyes. A flicker of want, yes, but also fear. Without another word, he left for the conference room, leaving her standing in the golden morning light, heart pounding, unsure whether she had just ruined everything, or started something she couldn't stop. Page 2, Chapter 13, Confession. The next evening, the rain returned. It came down in a steady hush against the office windows, turning the city lights into blurred streaks of color. Adrian's office glowed softly in the gray light, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. Mia stepped inside without knocking. He was standing by the window again, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled. He didn't turn when she closed the door. "You said you'd tell me," she reminded him quietly. "So tell me." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, without facing her, he said, "3 years ago, I was engaged." The words seemed to hang in the air like static. She worked in the company, brilliant, fearless. We tried to hide it, but people noticed. When the board found out, they questioned her promotions, every achievement she'd earned. The pressure destroyed her career and us. He paused, eyes unfocused on the skyline. When she left, the press called it an abuse of power. The company nearly collapsed. I rebuilt it, but the scandal never really went away. Mia's throat felt dry. "That's why you keep your distance." "That's why I have to." He turned at last, his expression raw, stripped of the calm she'd always seen. "When you walked into my office, I told myself I wouldn't repeat history. I wouldn't ruin another life just because I—" He stopped, searching for words, "because I cared more than I should." Mia stepped closer. The low light caught the tired lines around his eyes. "You didn't ruin her life," she said softly. "You loved her. People ruin things all the time and call it ambition." A humorless smile touched his mouth. "I crossed a line that shouldn't exist in a business like ours. And now you're afraid to feel anything again." He exhaled, the sound almost a laugh. "Yes, because wanting you feels like walking back into the fire." She met his gaze steadily. "Then maybe it's not the fire you should fear. Maybe it's what happens when you stop feeling anything at all." The rain deepened, tapping against the glass. Neither of them moved. The distance between them had never felt smaller or more fragile. Finally he said, "Tomorrow the auditors arrive. If this gets out—" "It won't," she said. "I know how to keep a secret." Adrian looked at her for a long moment. "I wish I could ask you to forget everything I've just said." "But you don't want me to," she replied. His silence was answer enough. When she finally turned to leave, his voice followed her, rough with exhaustion. "Mia, thank you for listening." She glanced back at him. "Next time, try trusting me before the damage is done." Then she was gone, leaving him standing alone, with the city's reflection staring back at him. Half light, half shadow, a man divided between what he wanted and what he feared to lose. H2, Chapter 14, Fallout. Chapter 14. By Monday morning, the building no longer felt like the place Mia had walked into weeks ago. The usual rhythm of keyboards and soft conversation was gone, replaced by a cautious silence that spread from cubicle to cubicle like fog. People whispered when they thought no one was listening. Heads turned when she passed. Something was wrong. She felt it instantly. When she reached her desk, her phone, vibrated with a message from HR. Black quote, "Please report to the executive boardroom at 9:15 a.m. Bracket, compliance review." Her pulse spiked. Compliance review. That phrase never meant anything good. Before she could think, her screen lit up again, this time with a message from Adrian. Black quote, "M. Don't panic. I'll handle it." Her stomach twisted. She wasn't sure whether to feel reassured or terrified. Inside the boardroom, the air was heavy with the scent of cologne and authority. The senior executives sat in a half-circle, documents spread across the glossy table. Adrian stood at the head, hands clasped behind his back. He looked calm, but Mia recognized the tension in the tight line of his jaw. "Miss Hart," said one of the directors, a woman in her 50s with clipped, icy diction, "there have been concerns regarding your recent proximity to Mr. Reed, late meetings, unscheduled travel, and now the compliance team has flagged irregularities in expense authorizations from the Los Angeles trip." Mia froze. "Irregularities? They appear personal," another director said, "and yet they were charged to the company." Her mind raced back to that night in LA. The hotel, the dinner, the receipts she never saw. Her throat tightened. "That must be a mistake. I approve them," Adrian interrupted, his voice cutting clean through the room. Every head turned toward him. "The expenses were mine," he said. "Hart had no involvement beyond company directives. If there's an issue, it falls on me." A beat of silence followed. The tension was palpable. "Mr. Reed," the woman from compliance said carefully, "given the board's history with internal relationships, I'm sure you understand why this looks problematic." "I understand perfectly," Adrian replied, his tone cool. "But I won't have an employee's reputation destroyed because of unfounded assumptions." The directors exchanged wary glances. One of them finally said, "We'll need to review this further." Adrian nodded once, "Then review it. But until you have evidence, I expect this discussion to stay within this room." His authority was enough to end the meeting. But as Mia followed him out, her hands trembled. They stepped into the corridor, quiet, carpeted, sterile. Adrian's composure cracked, just slightly, as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Who reported it?" she asked softly. He didn't answer. That silence said enough. "They think we—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "They think something's going on." He looked at her finally. His voice was low, controlled. "Something is going on, but not what they think." She stared at him. "Adrian, I'll fix this," he said, "even if it means stepping back." That word hit her like a slap. Stepping back. From her. From everything. "So you'll protect me by pretending none of it mattered?" Her voice broke slightly, despite her effort to sound steady. "I'll protect you by keeping you out of the crossfire." "That's not protection," she said, shaking her head. "That's erasure." He looked away. "You don't understand what they can do, Mia." "Then help me understand," she pleaded. "Because I'm the one they're whispering about. I'm the one everyone's watching now." The frustration in her voice cut through him. For a moment, he seemed about to say something honest. But then his phone buzzed, and reality came crashing back, her pulse loud in her ears. Then, slowly, she nodded. "I hope you remember that I didn't ask you to protect me. I just wanted you to be honest." And with that, she walked away, her heels striking the marble floor in sharp, echoing beats. When the elevator doors closed between them, Adrian pressed his palms against the cold glass of the window, and let the mask slip for just a second. The board had made its move. Someone inside the company had turned this into a scandal waiting to happen. And now, protecting Mia meant one thing. He would have to become the man he'd sworn never to be again. Chapter 15. The Scandal Breaks. Mia woke to the sound of her phone vibrating against the nightstand. At first, she thought it was her alarm. But when she blinked at the screen, the light from dozens of notifications flooded her half-asleep vision. Texts, missed calls, emails. Her heart started to pound before she even opened one. Block quote. Are you okay? Check the news. Strong. Oh my God. Mia, is it true? Block quote. The room suddenly felt smaller, suffocating. She sat up in bed, pushing her hair out of her face, and tapped on one of the links a friend had sent. Her stomach dropped. Steinfield scandal. CEO Adrian Reed allegedly in affair with young employee. Her name wasn't in the headline, but it might as well have been. The article included a grainy photo of her walking beside Adrian at the LA conference. Cropped just enough to spark speculation. Beneath it, anonymous sources described unprofessional closeness and lavish expenses. The longer she read, the louder the static in her ears became. There it was, her dream job, her hard work, everything she'd fought to earn, shredded in a few paragraphs. Her phone rang again. Megan. She answered, but her voice trembled. Meg. Oh my God, I just saw it. Mia, what happened? I don't know, I don't. She stopped herself before she said too much. It's not what they're saying. Do they know it's you? Mia hesitated. The photo didn't show her face clearly, but people inside the company would know. They'd recognize her hair, her clothes, her posture. It wouldn't take long. I need to go, she said softly, ending the call before she could hear Megan's worried reply. By the time she reached the office, the energy was different, electric, poisonous. Conversations cut off as she walked past. A few people looked away. Others didn't bother hiding their curiosity. She wanted to disappear. The elevator ride to her floor felt endless. When the doors opened, she found Adrian already standing by his office window, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, his phone pressed to his ear. The moment their eyes met, he ended the call. Mia, he said, voice low, urgent, you shouldn't have come in. I couldn't just hide, she said, trying to sound steady, though her throat burned. Everyone's already talking. I'm handling it, he replied. But there was tension in his tone, the kind that came from too many moving parts, spinning out of control. You can't handle all of this, Adrian. They think, I know what they think. His gaze darkened. Someone leaked those reports. I'll find out who. He moved closer, his presence grounding but heavy with conflict. You need to go home. Let me deal with the board and PR. I can't just vanish, she said, her voice breaking. That'll make it worse. He reached out, then stopped himself, his hand suspended mid-air between them. Mia. Her chest tightened. The distance between them suddenly felt unbearable. Not just physical, but a chasm built by power, scandal, and the fear of being seen. I told you I'd protect you, he said quietly, even if it costs me everything. She shook her head, tears stinging her eyes. That's not fair to either of us. He hesitated, then exhaled slowly, a man at war with his own instincts. They're calling an emergency meeting in an hour. HR, legal, and the board. They'll want statements. Until then, say nothing to anyone, please. His voice softened on that last word, and it was the softness that undid her. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. He froze. "What?" "Everything. That night. All of it." Silence stretched between them, thick and unsteady. Then, with quiet honesty, he said, "No, not for a second. But I hate that it's hurting you." Her breath caught, and she nodded once before stepping back, forcing distance where her heart wanted none. When she left his office, the hallway felt longer than it ever had. People whispered behind glass partitions, and her name, or pieces of it, floated through the air like broken echoes. By noon, she received an email from HR requesting her to appear for a formal interview regarding the allegations. She stared at the screen until the letters blurred. This wasn't just gossip anymore. It was an investigation. At the same time, in another part of the building, Adrian faced a conference table filled with shareholders and lawyers. The news had already reached investors. Stock alerts pinged every few seconds. "The press is running with it," said one of the PR directors. "We'll need a statement before end of day. Make it clear that Miss Hart is not under any internal scrutiny," Adrian said sharply. "If this board wants to take me apart, fine, but you will not drag her name through this." A murmur spread across the table. The chairman frowned. "You understand what you're implying, Reed." "I understand perfectly," Adrian said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I'm taking responsibility. All of it." The room fell silent. Somewhere in that silence, his reputation and his career began to fracture. Later that night, Mia sat in her apartment, blinds drawn, phone on silent. The city lights flickered through the window like distant stars. Her laptop screen still glowed with another headline. "Anonymous source claims Steinfield CEO to step down pending internal review." She closed it quickly, pressing her palm to her chest to steady her heartbeat. Her mind replayed every word he'd said, every warning she hadn't listened to, every glance that had meant too much. The knock on her door made her jump. When she opened it, Adrian stood there, exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes hollowed by the day. "Adrian, I had to see you," he said. His voice wasn't commanding anymore. It was quiet, human. "You shouldn't be here. I know. But if I don't see you now—" He paused, searching her face as though memorizing it. "They can take everything from me, Mia. But not this. Not what we are." Her breath hitched. For a long moment, neither moved. The world outside blurred into silence. And though she knew it was dangerous, reckless even, she stepped aside and let him in. H2. Chapter 16. The city outside was still a blur of blue-gray light when the world seemed to stop. Mia's phone lay face down on the coffee table, its screen still glowing from the last message she'd read. Her name, printed across a trending headline: "Scandal at Hallstrom Industries. CEO and employee affair allegations surface." The memory of last night flickered through her mind like a reel of shattered glass. Adrian's knock on her door, his eyes dark with a mixture of rage and fear. The way he had reached for her hand, even as the world began to turn against them. He had promised, voice low and hoarse, "I won't let them destroy you." Now, in the fragile hour before sunrise, that promise hovered between them, like a question neither could answer. She sat on the couch in one of his shirts, sleeves hanging loose over her wrists. The room smelled faintly of coffee and rain. Adrian stood by the window, tie loosened, phone silent for once. For the first time since the scandal broke, there were no calls, no messages, no demands, only the dull hum of a city that hadn't yet realized how much had changed. Mia broke the silence. "Do you think it'll stop?" He turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "No," he said quietly, "not for a while." The truth sat heavy in the air. The press would keep circling, the board would demand explanations, and strangers online would decide what kind of woman Mia Parker was. "I didn't want this," she whispered. "I know." He crossed the room and knelt beside her. "Neither did I." When he touched her cheek, the gesture was careful, reverent, like he was afraid she might break. The exhaustion in his eyes said more than any apology could. "You should rest," he murmured. "You haven't slept." "Neither have you." A faint smile touched his lips. "I don't remember the last time I did." For a moment, the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was shelter. The storm could wait outside a little longer. She let herself lean against him, feeling the rhythm of his breathing, the slow warmth of his hand tracing down her arm. "Adrian," she said softly, "what happens to us now?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he drew a slow breath, gaze drifting to the window where dawn was cutting through the rain. "We face it," he said finally. "Together, if you'll let me." Mia's throat tightened. Together. The word felt dangerous and safe at the same time. "You'll lose everything," she said. He met her eyes. "Maybe some things are worth losing." The honesty in his voice made her chest ache. She wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that love could be stronger than headlines, contracts, or board votes. But the world they lived in wasn't kind to people who crossed lines. She reached up, brushing her fingers over the bruise of exhaustion beneath his eye. "You shouldn't be here." He caught her hand. "And yet I am." There was no defiance in his tone, only quiet certainty. He leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching. The air between them hummed with everything they couldn't say. Outside, the rain began again, a soft percussion against the windows. Inside, the room was a fragile piece. Mia closed her eyes. "I keep thinking this is some kind of dream," she whispered, "that I'll wake up and the headlines will be gone." Adrian's thumb brushed over her knuckles. "If it were a dream, it'd be kinder than this." He pulled back, rising slowly to his feet. The movement broke the moment's stillness. He poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one beside her. "Drink," he said gently. "You'll need the strength." She took a sip, wincing at the bitterness. "What are you going to do?" "Damage control. Legal first, then the board. HR will need statements. My PR team will try to spin it." "And me?" His eyes softened. "You stay out of sight. Let me take the first hit." "I can't hide forever." "No," he said. "But for today, you can breathe." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion weighed too heavy. Instead, she nodded and sank back into the couch. He watched her, his expression torn between tenderness and guilt. For a few long minutes, the world seemed mercifully simple. The sound of rain, the taste of coffee, the soft echo of their shared silence. Then his phone vibrated. Once, twice, again. He didn't move. Neither did she. The sound felt like the ticking of a countdown clock. Finally, Adrian reached for it, scanning the screen. His jaw tightened. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated, then turned the phone so she could see. A photo, grainy, taken through the slats of her apartment window. Them, together, her face visible, his arm around her. Her stomach dropped. Someone was outside? Adrian nodded once, expression grim. It was taken last night. The coffee cup trembled in her hands. They know where I live. He was already in motion, phone to his ear, voice low but sharp. Find out who leaked the address, now. Mia rose, heart pounding. The sense of safety that had cocooned them minutes ago shattered like glass. The rain outside felt closer, louder, as if the storm had found its way in. Adrian ended the call and turned back to her. Pack a bag. What? You can't stay here anymore. Not after this. Her throat went dry. Where would I even go? With me. The words were out before he could second-guess them. His eyes met hers, steady, unflinching, full of something that was equal parts protection and desperation. She shook her head. Adrian, that'll only make it worse. Maybe, he said, but at least you'll be safe. Mia wanted to believe him, but fear coiled tight in her chest. She looked at the phone, still glowing on the table, the photo that would soon spread across every screen. The world was already watching. Adrian, she began. Before she could finish, a sharp knock split the air. Once, twice, 3 times. They both froze. Adrian's gaze flicked to the door, then back to her. Stay here. Her pulse hammered as he crossed the room, each step echoing louder than the rain. Another knock, harder this time. Whoever was outside wasn't leaving. He unlocked the door. On the threshold stood a woman in a black coat, rain dripping from her hair. An ID badge clipped to her lapel. Behind her, the hallway lights glared harshly against the dim apartment. Mr. Hallstrom, she said, voice steady but urgent. We need to talk, right now. Adrian's jaw set. Who sent you? Legal, she replied, and the board. They know you're here. Mia rose from the couch, her pulse crashing in her ears. The fragile morning had ended. The siege had begun. H3, Chapter 17, The Light After the Storm. Parentheses. Morning city ambience, muted newsroom chatter fades in. In brackets. Breaking news this morning. Steinfield Corporation has issued an official statement clearing former intern Mia Finley of any wrongdoing in the recent media controversy. CEO Adrian Steinfield personally addressed the board late last night, taking full responsibility for what he called a failure of corporate discretion, not a failure of character. Multiple outlets have since retracted their earlier claims. The company's shares, which dipped sharply last week, have already begun to recover. Period. Newsroom fades out. Soft piano begins. Mia sat on the edge of her couch, the glow of the television washing over her tired face. The sound of her name, spoken calmly, no longer weaponized, felt strange in her ears. For the first time in weeks, the air inside her apartment didn't feel heavy. It smelled of brewed coffee instead of fear. She pulled her knees to her chest and let the silence settle. The world outside was still half asleep, a pale sheet of rain tracing the windows. Her phone buzzed with message after message, friends, classmates, even strangers offering words of support. But she couldn't bring herself to answer any of them. Yet, all she could think about was the man who had walked into the fire for her. Adrian had promised he'd make it right. She hadn't known what that meant until she saw him last night, standing before the board of directors in a midnight blue suit, sleeves rolled up, voice low but unshakable. He hadn't defended himself. He had defended her. Mia Finley's work speaks for itself, he had said. If this company values integrity, then it must start by recognizing hers. The memory of that moment replayed in her mind like a heartbeat. A soft knock broke through the quiet. She turned, and there he was, framed in the doorway of her apartment, like someone who wasn't sure he was still welcome. His tie was gone, his eyes shadowed from sleepless hours, but when they met hers, the exhaustion turned into something lighter. "Mia," he breathed, almost a question. She rose slowly, heart hammering, unsure whether to cry or smile. "They cleared you," he said. "It's over." "I know," she whispered. "I saw the news." For a long moment, neither moved. Then she crossed the space between them, her hands trembling as they reached for his coat. "You didn't have to risk everything," she said. "I did," he replied simply, "because you were worth the truth." Her breath hitched. Weeks of fear, anger, and confusion cracked open at once, and the tears came. Quiet, relieved, unstoppable. He gathered her in his arms, and she let herself collapse against him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat under her cheek. No grand speeches, no fireworks, just the soft exhale of two people finally able to breathe again. Later that morning, they rode the elevator together to the top floor of Steinfield Corporation. Reporters crowded the lobby, but the security glass kept the noise at bay. The doors opened to the boardroom, empty now, except for the lingering scent of espresso and polished wood. Adrian set a slim folder on the table, the official closure of the investigation, signed by every board member. "You're reinstated," he said, "not as an intern, as part of the project team." Her eyes widened. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "It's the right idea," he answered, "because you earned it." She looked at the folder, then at him. "What about you?" He exhaled. "I'll stay through the quarter, then take a step back. Let someone else steer for a while. Maybe remember what life looks like outside these walls." Mia smiled faintly. "Maybe you'll like it." "Only if you're there," he said, voice softer than she'd ever heard it. When the press conference began, cameras flashed through the glass doors. Adrian spoke first. Measured, clear, unapologetically human. "The past weeks have reminded me that power means nothing without accountability. I allowed lines to blur, and in doing so, I hurt someone whose only fault was believing in her work. The company has reviewed every claim, and I'm grateful that truth has prevailed." He looked toward Mia, standing quietly at the side. "To Miss Finley, thank you for your grace under pressure. The Steinfield name owes you more than words." The room fell silent. Reporters scribbled. Lenses clicked. But for Mia, it all receded into a muffled hum. What mattered was the way his gaze found hers across the room. Not as CEO and subordinate, not as scandal and survivor, but as equals finally seen. Outside, the rain had stopped. The building's lobby shimmered under the reflection of wet pavement, and the first shaft of sunlight pushing through the clouds. Adrian turned to her as the revolving doors slowed. "You ready?" Mia hesitated. The cameras still lingered across the street, waiting for any sign of drama. She could feel the weight of every headline that might follow them. But then he offered his hand, steady, open, unguarded, and for the first time, she didn't feel like running. She slipped her fingers into his, the warmth of his palm grounding her as they stepped forward together. The glass doors parted with a soft sigh. The city's noise spilled in. Traffic, voices, life. Mia lifted her face to the light breaking through the gray sky. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. They walked out of the building side by side, leaving behind the echoes of scandal, stepping into the wide, uncertain brightness of morning. Swells fade out.